What do the unionists and those who are pro-union parties have to do to convince Scotland to stay in the union? Because it's fallen on deaf ears for many as well, and Boris Johnson himself very unpopular this side of the border, despite the fact that actually the financial ramifications of independence, well, actually they're very questionable, and actually there aren't real answers from the SNP on how they would balance the books as well. So what would you do to persuade Scots that the union is actually worth keeping with?
Well, actually, the first thing we have to do is to be much more positive about what the UK delivers to Scotland and what Scotland delivers to the rest of the UK. We are a family of nations. That pooling and sharing of resources across the UK is what makes Scotland so strong. And we have a very, very strong Scottish Parliament. It's one of the strongest devolved legislatures in the world that makes all the decisions about the day-to-day lives of Scots in health and education and the economy and jobs. And therefore, those powers can be maximised for the benefit of Scotland, but we're also within the safety and security of the United Kingdom. And that gets you the best of both worlds. So we have to be very positive about that economic, social and cultural case. Scotland has its own culture, of course, it has its own history, it has its own dialects, it has its own language, and we should celebrate those. We're all patriotic and we're all patriots, but we don't necessarily think we should be nationalists and separating away from the rest of the United Kingdom. And there's a lot of great contradictions in this, which is very complicated for your viewers in America to understand. But if they really think through where we've got to in terms of the case, the catalyst for a second independence referendum, as you said in your opening remarks, has undoubtedly been Brexit. But the irony of that is that all the arguments that brought us Brexit are exactly the same arguments that would bring us Scottish independence. And of course, Scotland was very much against Brexit, very much against leaving the European Union, but all the issues around leaving the United Kingdom are exactly the same arguments the Brexiteers would have made, but they're much more pronounced in a Scottish context. And we can't get any of the answers to the questions. So the second thing we have to do is to relentlessly expose the big questions that need answered by the proponents of independence and separation. And those are around currency, they're around a border with England, they're around what it would take for Scotland to get back into the European Union. It's all of those huge, huge questions that are currently unanswered and have remained unanswered since the last referendum.
Very clear there. I just want to ask a broad question. You recently said in an interview that in order for Labour to get the keys to 10 Downing Street, it is incumbent on them to gain the support again of Scottish voters. And we know that Labour performed quite poorly in Scotland in the most recent elections. Let me ask you this. How would you rate Sir Keir Starmer's performance so far as leader of the Labour Party? And is his message resonating with Scottish voters?
Well, I think the thing to remember is that when Keir Starmer took over, the Labour Party had just had its worst election defeat in 100 years. And in fact, it's probably one of its worst in history. And that included all parts of the UK, not just Scotland. So he took over a ship that was very much sinking. And I think people have to also realise that when he became leader on the 4th of April last year, there has only been one political issue in town since then, and that's been the COVID pandemic and how we recover from that. So there hasn't really been much room to talk about other things, to show what Keir Starmer's vision is for the rest of the United Kingdom in the future, what an alternative Labour government at UK level would deliver, not just to Scotland but other parts of the UK, that kind of policy development. And I think if I can maybe draw some parallels with America, the only thing that's ever being talked about at the moment is COVID. It's about people's jobs. It's about recovering our health services and our public services. It's about how we deal with the debt and the deficits that have been left with trying to deal with the pandemic. It's how we're able to put money into the economy to support businesses and people. These are the big things that we've been talking about. These are the big things that people are talking about, but there's no space really to talk about anything else. So I think Keir Starmer needs a little bit of time to come into his own, to develop his own positive policy platform, and to be able to take that out into the country. That takes time to do. He did take over a very, very difficult position from the last general election, and I think he deserves the time to be able to articulate that new future, that hope and that aspiration for what the Labour Party and government would deliver to the people of this country.
Right. Well, point well taken, but maybe voters don't want to give him time. If you look at the results of the by-election this morning in Hartlepool, it's actually pointing to a crushing defeat for the Labour Party. And many people are saying that this was a missed opportunity for the Labour Party to come up with a consistent message and not just focus on the public health situation. Do you think that the past 12 months Labour perhaps have not done enough in terms of dictating exactly what that economic message is beyond the realms of the coronavirus situation?
Well, I think the first two things to say is that Keir Starmer himself has taken full responsibility for the election result in Hartlepool. He says he wants to speed up the process of change. He wants to speed up policy development. He wants to speed up and harden the message about what he wants to deliver as a future Prime Minister. And I think that's the right attitude and the right approach to take to such a devastating result in Hartlepool. Let's not forget that actually that seat should have been lost at the election at the end of 2019 because there was a 25% almost voted for the Brexit party. That party did not stand, and so it was a very, very difficult seat in those circumstances for Labour to hold on to. There's a whole host of circumstances, but I think the important thing is that Keir takes full responsibility, of which he has done. He reflects on what needs to be done, and he needs to speed up the process of change for the Labour Party and articulate that message to the public. Yes, I think we could have been doing a lot more over the last 12 months in order to make that change, but really the sole focus has to be on COVID. The sole focus has to be on COVID recovery because that's the right thing for the country and the national interest. But we need to speed up the process of articulating that change and what our policy should be in the future.